Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. I was thinking about just the monotony of life and how that kind of trickles down to the 2A2. You go out to the range, you take some friends out, or maybe you just go by yourself and you're doing some training. Then you inevitably have to come home and clean the guns you have. I remember when I was younger, cleaning your guns was a privilege. That was the only time we got to handle them because I didn't have a lot of ammunition back then because we were poorer, so we didn't have a lot of, rounds to go plink with and go mess around with and train. Fast forward nowadays, that's less of a problem. It's getting to be a problem with inflation, but I still manage to go out and train. But I remember very succinctly that, cleaning your gun cleaning my gun specifically, was an honor because living in the Southwest, you tend to have swamp coolers, which increases the humidity in your home, especially, during the summer. And humidity does not go well with firearms if you have non-stainless steel guns. It's less of a problem nowadays because swamp coolers have gotten better. There's better technology that you can put in your, a lot of us put desiccant inside our gun cabinets to keep moisture away from our firearms. But I remember getting to oil up my guns, make sure there was no rust on them, clean them. And my dad always made sure that it was kind of a military type of clean. So we probably over-cleaned the hell out of our barrels, my brothers and myself and my dad, given that, using bronze or copper brushes, metal brushes in particularly, on barrels tends to wear them out more. Nowadays, as I've gotten older and my training knowledge of the 2A and knowledge of firearms has increased dramatically, I don't do that as much. I do service my weapons. I do clean them. I'm less anal about it. At least 3 times a year, I will take my black rifles, the ones that are ones I consider, if the ball drops tomorrow, the world is ending, Western civilization is melting down. There's one of 3 rifles I'm going to grab, and I'm probably going to grab all 3, to be honest. I don't know how I'm going to carry them all, but I'm going to probably grab all 3 if I'm mobile. If I'm in a truck, I'm definitely taking all 3 of them. If I'm on a motorcycle, probably taking 1 and a pistol. If I'm on foot, probably taking 1 and a pistol, and probably my MP5. My MP5 has become one of my favorite guns. It's just reliable. It just runs. The one downside of any roller-delayed gun, it doesn't matter if it's your MP5, a PTR 91, an HK 91, an HK 93, a C96, I think is what they're, C93, there we go, C93 from Century, or one of the new 93 clones, HK 93 clones, that is on 5.56. They're all dirty as hell. It doesn't matter. It is the dirtiest gun I have ever fired. And it's symptomatic of how the gun works. It doesn't have a gas system, so what it actually does is the rollers impinge upon the barrel, or not the barrel, the trunnion and the bolt in such a way that it keeps it locked until it's safe for the round to be, the brass to be extracted. In doing so, it traps a lot of carbon in the flutes in the chamber of whatever caliber, as well as inside the trunnion itself. And you have to clean that out. It's rare that the gun malfunctions because it's not clean. So, as I have shot guns, I have experimented. A Kalashnikov lives up to its name. You do not have to clean it all the time. Not as religiously. You still need to clean it. You still need to service it. You still need to check it. But not on the level that I'm talking about when I was a kid. I remember I had a Remington Nylon 22 rifle. It was the first rifle I ever got. I spoke about this. I remember my brothers and my dad sitting there watching me do this and teaching me how to strip this gun down to its bare bolts and screws and clean each and every recess with oil and hoppies to get rid of any copper or lead deposits, and swabbing the barrel. Okay. Fast forward a little bit later, I got a German K98 and the same type of procedure. My dad taught me how to field strip the K98 bolt. He taught me how to service the weapon probably better than the Germans did, because my dad being that type of person. And my uncle also, my Uncle Phil. So I learned very early on how to service these weapons, and it helps when you start getting older and you're really curious about this stuff, or you're just really curious and you're younger. My sons and my daughter are good examples of this, is that they can service something. If something fails, firing pin wears out. This happens. Whether it's an AR-15, Kalashnikov, doesn't matter. An extractor spring, they fail. They wear out. If you use your gun, you're going to have parts that wear out. With modern firearms, it's not really a problem. If you're cleaning your gun, when you finally get around to it, you are checking those things. You're checking for wear. You're checking to see if it's broken. And that's part of the servicing of your gun. But man, is it tedious. Think about it. I have two AK-74s, or 5.45 by 39s. And I have a surplus stock of 7 and 6. And it is the best reliable ammunition for that round. And I have such a stock of it that I am not ashamed to use it. So I will go out and shoot it. But there's one huge flaw with it. Is it's corrosive. The powder is. And what happens is, if you do not clean your gun right away, it will corrode. Okay, so this is one of those guns that if I take it out to the range and I let someone shoot it, or I shoot it myself, and I train with one of the two, and I use 7 and 6 because that's usually what I can find and what I have, because I haven't found a good store of 5.45 by 39, I have to clean it. Now, cleaning that particular gun is different. Thanks to Rob Ski and the AKOU, I learned very early on, if you're using corrosive ammunition. I wish I would have known this back when I still have my Mausers, but when I was shooting corrosive German ammo from World War II, and later on the stuff that was made from Eastern Bloc countries for that particular caliber, 8mm ammunition, that was corrosive primer specifically. What Rob Ski says, and it's true, is if you take some water, bottled water, and you rinse the barrel out and the gas system out, and then you promptly clean your gun. That means you lubricate it, you use hoppies, whatever you normally do for your barrel treatments to clean your gun. That gets rid of any of the corrosive deposits, and your gun never corrodes. Okay? Add that to your normal cleaning routine, and that's a pain in the ass. Think about it. You're taking a bottle of water, you're taking your Kalashnikov, you're stripping it, basically field stripping it, which that's not hard, but you're pouring it down the barrel, into the gas block, around the gas tube, in the gas piston, or on the gas piston, and you're rinsing it off, trying to get all these deposits off. Then you have to wipe every bit of that oil off, because you've just exposed all those innermost parts to corrosive material, water. Okay, so you have to absorb all that water, clean it out, and you have to make sure the gun is dry and lubricated after that. Okay. It makes me want to shoot those guns less, and my age that I've gotten to. They're just as fun, but I would rather go take my AR-15 out, or even my dirty roller delayed guns, and shoot them. And what I've noticed is that when I come home, I'm not as enthused about cleaning the guns, because that's not the only time I handle guns anymore. I handle guns at least once a week. I touch a trigger, nightly. Truthfully, I dry fire train every night, because shooting is a perishable skill. Trigger pull is one of the keys to marksmanship and to excellent shooting ability. So having had very good trainers that taught me how to do some very cheap training, as well as very effective training for trigger discipline, I touch a trigger every night. Okay, so I don't have the same problems I had as a kid, where I would have to, the one chance I got to touch these guns are that one rare time where I would clean and service them because of, a swamp cooler, basically. Or that it was just time, as my dad would put it, because they've been sitting in the cabinet long enough that they need to be lubricated and tested to make sure that they're going to work. Now, in reality, once you lubricate a gun, it is still a good idea to lubricate it, or to make sure it's still lubricated, because lubricants dissolve, evaporate, or otherwise displace themselves from the parts that you're actually worried about. Case in point, the AR-15. And especially in drier climates and those really wet climates, there's always a chance of rust for those. But in New Mexico, we don't have humidity unless we introduce it ourselves. We have usually negative humidity, where the water is literally vaporizing when you put it outside. You can take a glass of water and go outside and have it evaporate during certain times of year. So I digress. I don't have those same issues that I once had, where I have to, that was the only time I got to experience the 2A, because I couldn't go out shooting. My dad's way of training us and keeping us kind of honed, and I say us, my brothers and myself, my little sister too, in the 2A was to get us to clean and handle the guns. And we would go through basics of how to make anchor points, how you're making your anchor points so you're effective shooting, trigger discipline, and I say safety as well as actually trigger squeeze. My dad would take the bolt apart from my Mauser, pull the firing pin out of it, and still assemble the gun sort of the best way you could, so that you wouldn't get the same experience with the trigger pull. And it sounds hokey, but it worked. My dad used to call the two-stage trigger that is in an old military-style rifle like the K98 a military trigger pull. Nowadays, I would know that as a two-stage trigger. So what happens in a two-stage trigger is you have a little bit of slack, and then you hit a wall, and then a crisp break. If you learn how to shoot those, it makes you an accurate shooter, because you're never really expecting the gun to go off. It just surprises you every time. And it makes you not as much of a trigger snob. Now, I've gotten to where I have been now. My buddy Dexton, my brother from another mother, he has gotten really good at tuning rifles, and he's gotten really good at selecting triggers that I'm kind of envious of. And I would say that's part of this whole thing, When you service your weapons, you check for gas rings, the wear on those, because it's a wear item in the AR-15 and the AR-10s. But you learn how to change those parts out. And that's what this is all about. It gets tedious, but if you think about the alternative, that if it does rain, so to speak, and you do have to use one of these, that the gun is reliable and works. I've had some friends that used to never clean their guns because they were afraid that if they cleaned them, that they would mess up the gun from working, keep it from working. The exact opposite is actually what happens, is the longer you neglect something, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that I've gotten to the point where I don't clean them as often as I once did, and it's not necessary. I make sure the bore is clean, okay, and that there's nothing that will corrode it. I make sure there's no debris in it, especially if I was out training in the dirt. I make sure I clean that gun when I come home, because that's usually one of those guns that if it's raining, as I put it, I want it to work. But if I'm just out there having fun plinking and I put maybe 20 rounds through the gun, not really worried about it unless I'm using 7 and 6. Because the reality is modern propellants, and the fact that you only put 20 rounds through a rifle, even that really, really dirty one, the one that gets really dirty, that's not outside of the realm of a firefight or a fire mission or a training session in real life for these rifles being in service. So there is something to be said about not over cleaning your gun. Yes, it's cool that you get to touch them. Yes, it's cool that you service them and check them and make sure that they're good. But I am at that level like I once was, where this is like an obsession that I had to have this gun 100% clean and spotless. No. And my AR-15, I don't train as much with it as I probably should. I do train more with a 5.56 Kalashnikov, but I do train with my AR-15. It's not one that has ever had any failures so far because of its build quality and the parts I've selected to put it together. I check it and clean it, but it's not an obsession. And that's what I'm getting at. Don't be the guy that wears out this really great barrel you have on your gun by over-cleaning it. I've mentioned this before. Don't be that guy that tears apart the gun and can't put it back together. Learn. Find your match, your sage, the person that's going to help, your mentor. Find your mentor in the 2A, because that's important. But don't get too tied up in the minutia of the 2A. The AR-15 had a bad reputation for a long time, that it had to be cleaned and serviced, otherwise it wouldn't work. After having multiple AR-15s and building multiples of these for myself or helping my friends build them legally, it's sad that I even have to mention that, but in case someone ever hears that, that's the actual truth. I've only helped people do this legally. It teaches you what to do to service the gun if you need to. And helping yourself be successful if it rains is a good plan. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.